ladies of Vantage Point. We're so excited to be with you this evening after a nice couple of weeks off, well-deserved time off. But I hope you guys are enjoying your spring break, and we thank you for joining us our show today. And today we're going to be discussing how do you handle conflict within your family. Let's be honest. We all have family conflicts. I don't care how, what we post on social media, how things may appear on the outside, but within our homes, there's always something going on, something brewing, and that's okay. I believe that conflicts are necessary, but how do we resolve them? I know one of the things that one of my greatest feedback and still learning how to do this is learning how to communicate effectively. My thing was, girls, let me tell you, I was that type of person. I would run from conflict. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. If there's an issue, you best come with a solution. But within that, I used to take conflict as a personal attack. Yeah. So, and I learned over the years that just because we disagree doesn't mean that it's personal. That means we just don't agree on that specific issue, that specific problem. That problem is that thing that divides us. We can still have a different vantage point, but still love each other.
Yeah.
Not every family have those type of dynamics. And Alexa, I'm going to cue it to you. What are some of the things that you think that can help us resolve conflicts effectively?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because you hit the nail right on the head when you start talking about communication. And I think one of the problems that I've had in my family, both my current family and the family I grew up with, was, sometimes families don't like to bring up conflict. It's like if there's a conflict, you might want to hide it under the rug. Let's not just talk about it. And I think the main thing is bringing it out into the open, because if you just let it fester, it grows. And, we've all seen that some of those things burst out into the public if we don't deal with them, when we can. So when you talk about communication, Serge, I'm right there. One of my main things I would say is that it's so important to learn how to listen. I just underscore it, underline it, bold, highlight. You have to learn how to listen, because when this is what happens. You got two people and they're arguing about something, whether they're being vocal about it, or whether they're just simmering, that like coldness in the room. And when you learn to start talking, and then when you learn especially to start listening, you give the other person the respect that says, okay, I want to hear your point of view. All of my thoughts is not the whole picture. So I want to hear what you have to say about it. And I think that really honors people. I think that kind of gives them the respect they need to kind of open up even more. So I think I would start with listening. I know, Natalie, you come from a really big family, and sometimes when your family is large, I don't know, is it hard to kind of get a word in edgewise, or, what's it like?
Yeah, it is large and it's fun. I think, with large families, here's the thing that's important to know is to know that there are boundaries, right? Sometimes we just go a little bit too far, and we got to be careful that when we're touching on a pain point, you know what I mean? But I think it's also important to acknowledge that conflict in general, whether it's with your family, big or small, or in a relationship, or even at work, in the workplace, it is healthy. It's not always, it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Here's the thing about conflict. If managed well, it allows us to clarify some things, right? So what we don't want to happen in the workplace, in personal relationships, or even in our families is not address things, not with the sideways digs. Serge, you mentioned social media earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this very clearly. Social media is not the place for you to handle your family conflict. It is not good, right? Yeah. We have to cover our family. We should be covering each other, but that's no place to handle conflict of any sorts, but especially with family. But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering, because you brought up Facebook, and I was thinking, what's the intent behind that? If you've got family members who are arguing about something, or there's some kind of conflict, what's the intent of exposing it to the public, to getting it out there on Facebook? We've seen it, with celebrities all the time. Most recently, they came up with Kirk Franklin. So what's the idea behind, I'm going to let everybody know?
Right. I think you nailed it. I think that is your vetting tool when you post anything on any social media platform. What is the intended outcome of what I'm about to put on the World Wide Web?
Yeah.
Right. Let's be clear about that. It's the World Wide Web. What is the intent? Am I trying to gain allyship from other people? Am I trying to just stir up something? Am I instigating? Am I, ask yourself those things. And I think, it can help govern, your intent, just what it is that you're trying to do. But for the most part, and I'm not saying I get it right all the time. Let me also acknowledge that I don't get it right all the time. There are certain things, there are certain relationships where there is some conflict. And I am still in the process of trying to assess the language that I'm going to try to use and the approach. But I also know that, social media and passive aggressive posts is just not the way to do it. Not only there, but even within, conversation with other family members or other relationships. Like personally, I don't say extremely private, but I just value my privacy, quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I protect it. And I think about an experience I had when I was in high school. I was following someone who was a very, very good friend, very good friend. I was in the 11th grade. I'll never forget it. And she was saying some very unkind things about me. And it was like fourth period and like sixth period. Hey girl, how you doing? And I was just in awe about the two-faced moment.
The flip-flop.
And it was just fascinating to me. So thereafter, since forever, that marked me where I'm very guarded with information pertaining to myself, to my family, or people that I love and care about, and even other people. Like we should cover other people, even when their business is out there, or conflict is visible. So anyhow, I've been always extremely private from that experience. And when I'm gonna be real, that I can have a human moment when my stuff is out there, or where I hear other people conversing about my family or whatever it is, or even other people's families. There's a thing that rises up on me that ain't cute.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, die flesh, die right now.
Yeah.
Right?
That thing about drawing other people in, when other people start to get into personal matters, family matters. I remember, Serge, once you had a post and you were talking about how other children are off limits. It's like children are off limits. You don't start talking about other children. You don't pull that into the fray. And so for one person to start talking about somebody else's children and all this is now publicly exposed, that's a hot mess.
That's a hot mess. It's so funny. I'm going to touch on social media for a second, because I see this quite often. And, you brought up a great question when you said, why do we do that? And I think we're looking for attention. But I think we're looking for attention, for all the wrong reasons. You're looking for someone to pacify and agree with you, where you really need to really walk away from social media and go to the problem and try to fix it, versus allowing the world to see your issues. Because it brings, believe it or not, it brings a negative attention. And those that are agreeing with you, they're really trying to get in your business, and they really want to know more about you, so you could be a conversation piece, and you said something that I got emotional a little bit when you started to speak on your experience, because a lot of times within our family dynamics, and I'm going to touch on family, especially in marital situation and being a parent, we were all raised differently, okay? And we all have experiences that has developed us. And a lot of times I had to learn to give people grace, because I know for me, I have to process differently. I have to sit back and analyze everything and then come to it, where by me, being quiet, someone else may take it, oh, she's being standoffish, or she's being disrespectful because she's not listening. I'm listening. It's just that I may not agree with you, but how do I disagree respectfully? Because sometimes you and I we might be right. Just your timing is off. And that's another thing. I've learned that to resolve conflict, you have to be so sensitive in your season, in your timing, because you can say the right thing at the wrong time and it's a mess.
Yes.
And I've gotten caught up to that. I've said something I thought was dynamic and was just, wow. And I realized that didn't go over very well. And my delivery may have been off. I may have had an attitude about it. All of that comes into play.
Yeah, it really does. Your timing, everything you just said is really important, because the timing, all that means that two people have to be ready to resolve it.
Yeah.
Two people have to be ready to resolve it. Natalie, when you were talking about conflict, especially in the workplace or wherever, can be a good thing. Well, it's only a good thing if two people are like, okay, let's take this on together. You're not my enemy. We're gonna work on this. I want to make sure that we're letting everybody in. If you've got a comment about this, if you've got a vantage point, listeners, we want you to chime in with your questions, and even more specifically, what is it that you do in your family relationships, in your work relationships, in your partner, your girlfriend, boyfriend, spousal relationships? What is it that you do to either minimize conflict or to resolve it? Because, Serge, you start off at the top of the show saying we all have it. And I am particularly sensitive to people who are dealing with this in the public. I think that when you're dealing with conflict in the public, especially when it's a family, that, that's a whole level of exposure that just brings out an additional layer of embarrassment, shame. We end up doing things that we would never normally do. And it doesn't resolve it. It doesn't go to something that's productive or positive.
Yeah.
So what is your take? What are you both of your take on the idea that what happens in the family needs to stay in the family? Is it ever a good time for you to expose it? Is it ever a good time for you to let it out or let somebody in on what's happening in the family?
So I think exposure, we've got to really define exposure, because it can be different in different settings. So like if we're posting, if something's exposed to other people who have no stake in the game, nothing but gossip, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if there's something going on, if there's abuse, if there's addiction, if there's something that really requires professional help, clinical help, legal help, whatever it is, then that needs to be exposed. It really should. So I think we need to be clear on what exposure is, because sometimes to the detriment of a lot of our families, we're hiding those things. Mental health, we suppress it, we hide it, we say this is not a problem, we keep it in the house. But there are times when things are just beyond what we can do as a family. If we love people, if we love our loved ones, and we want the absolute best for them, then we've got to know and discern when is a good time to bring in help. So, we've got to identify who that is for us. Listen, this is it. Whoever that safe place is, it could be your pastor, it could be your a therapist, it could be, whoever it is, but someone who can be unbiased and discern that, whoa, flag on the play, this is a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And we need help. And here's some steps on how to do that. But when we're out there and showing and putting other people's business out there just because, and then you're on the other end enjoying it, that's a problem. Yeah. I have a very strong vantage point on this. Here it goes. It's nobody's business. When you are enjoying somebody else's pain for gossip and to ridicule, and when they're experiencing embarrassment and shame, Natalie doesn't want to partake in that. That's not funny to me. Yeah. I don't enjoy it. And I think if you're ever on the post of being ridiculed or embarrassed or shame, if you were ever in that position, then you can also be very highly sensitive to it as well. But as the people, we've got to do a little bit better.
Yeah.
We've got to do better.
Everything she said. I totally agree with her. It's amazing. I'm going to take this a little bit further. You're right. There's some things you do keep in the family. Not everything needs to be dished out there. However, I do give my children permission. Well, my son is a grown man now, so that's a different story. But my girls, I said, there are certain people you can trust with your stuff. And if you need to talk to them, and you don't feel coming to me or dad about it, you have permission to talk to A, B, and C. And they have to be comfortable, because it's so funny we're having this conversation today, because impromptu girl time with my girls. Mm-hmm. And literally I'm sitting on the steps and they're sitting in the hallway on the floor and we're just chatting. And I was just basking in it. And there's certain things they were sharing with me. They're like, Mom, I wouldn't talk to so-and-so about my issues. I would rather talk to so-and-so. And that was a relief for me, because they were picking people that they had observed and they know that they can trust. You have to teach your children or your family members who you can trust. Because the truth of the matter is, like Nat said, there's some people that might be in your circle per se, but not necessarily for you. And you have to be able to discern that. And sometimes it's family members.
Yeah.
Because
That
I'm
is
telling
so good. No, that is so good.
yeah, because some of my kids are not allowed to talk to just any family member. If they know that, I'm like, And I said, you watch their life, watch their fruit. What do you see? I'm like, all right, not to be judgmental, but to learn.
So to have that set up in advance where your children know they are safe people to go to. And then as their personalities develop and relationships develop, they'll pick and choose. Oh, I really want to go talk to Auntie X, or no, I want to go talk to Sister Y. They'll have their own, intake in it. But I love that. That's such a good takeaway. I was thinking that it's so good to get that outside perspective, whether it's a trusted friend or whether it's official counseling. Because when you're dealing with a situation, especially as parents, you're so close in. And when something is going on with your child, your heart is all in it. And just having that perspective, that distance that you have with a counselor or somebody else that can tell you, you're on the right track. You're thinking about this the right way. Or no, slow your roll. I know in my own personal life, there's been some times when I thought I was communicating a certain way. I thought, I was saying this. My daughter, she had a situation for a while. We were dealing with it, and I thought I was saying all the right things and doing all the right things, and in that communicating that I loved her. But what she was hearing was just frustration. And it goes back to communication because, you might be saying one thing and they're hearing another thing and you're just missing each other by a mile. But I just firmly believe in counseling. If you can get a good counseling, some outside perspective that can help you, when you say this, it doesn't quite sound that way. And when you're saying this, what they really mean, maybe, especially if they're a child, if they're a teen, they may not be able to articulate their problems exactly well. So that outside person, it really can come together. It really can.
I will say this. I've witnessed this with you, Serge, in particular, where you sat your babies down and you said, see this one right here? This is a safe person. Like parents have to call it out, like and discern that too. Like who is the appropriate person? And I've been in 2 scenarios with 2 friends who did that, and it was in all. And they said, I don't need to know anything, but I trust their judgment. I trust their walk. I trust their fruit. Very, very important to call it out. And then parents, I think sometimes, I had a long career in education and I've dealt with some parents. There are some parents who are holding on to things so tight and say, no, my way is the only way, or my message, or me as the vessel is the only vessel because I'm the mother and I'm the father or the guardian. But I think a lot of parents can acknowledge that sometimes an aunt or a mentor or a coach or somebody can say the same exact thing that you said to your kid, but for some reason it lands a little bit different from that person. So I think it's really thinking about what is the best person or the best way to get this message to my child. When I was like 26, 27, I said, you know what, Mom? Turns out you didn't know it all, but I needed to hear it from my instructor or from my coach all those years. And the other thing I want to mention is, conflict with parents. So, we're talking a lot about teenagers, but now I'm grown, right? I think we should address that conflict between your parents or elders. Let's say elders, right? In your family, those things happen too, because as you grew up being socialized under whatever norms and patterns and culture and traditions, right? But now you become an adult and you're starting to create new ones. And whatever that is, and your walks are different, and then that conflict naturally happens. I think it's so, so important, of course, to honor your elders and your parents. And I'm going to say a but, and I'm always reluctant to use a but because we know butts have cracks, but there's a point where you get to, especially when there's abuse. I observed a situation recently where it's an elderly parent who's extremely abusive to their adult child, and there's a lot of conflict there. I do believe that you can honor your parents from a tremendous distance. When you're getting beat up, when there's abuse, whatever that is, you get to say, I love you, and I can honor you, and I'll respect you. And to maintain that honor and respect, I'm gonna do it from way over here. Because when we're over here, I'm coming out of my flesh. I'm getting off of my what is the word? Like if you're taking me off my stool, that's a problem. I think we got to know what those boundaries are.
Yeah.
Not giving it a green light to be disrespectful to your parents, but also know when it's borderline abuse. And then also when you're the head of your family and your home, that's your role. Like we got to know our role in all conflict. What is my role here?
Yeah, the respect, I think the respect is another great takeaway, because in order for any conflict to be settled, you have to have two parties that are willing to engage, and there has to be some kind of respect. This kind of makes me think a little bit about discipline, because when I was younger, my mother would never, ever hit us. She was just against anything that was physical. She would never hit us. My dad was just the opposite. He would line all four of us in a row and boop, 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 boop. He would get us good. And I've always thought about discipline in the sense of what works and what doesn't work. But however you discipline a child, whether you're going to be talking to them or whether, to me, you have to be a certain age. You have to be young enough to be hit. You don't just go whacking off on somebody who's older. So whatever the age is, whatever the personality of your child is, when you're disciplining them, when you're talking to them, when you're coaching them, if they don't have a respect for you, if they don't have a respect for that family household, that family dynamic, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I'm wondering, have you had any problems with that, or what could we, tell our viewers, what would you be thinking? We want to hear from you. How do you handle discipline in the home?
It's so funny when you said that your mom didn't hit. Well, I'm the polar opposite. I'm quick. I'm quick with the hands when my kids are little. My kids are now 20, 26, 18, and 16. So, of course, now we have more sit-down conversations. But when they were younger, they knew I was quick with the hands, where my husband was more like your mom, Alexa, one would sit down and have a 4-hour meeting, which I thought was just nuts. But how I disciplined them was I would also share why I'm disciplining them. So it depends what it is. Until this very day, and I don't, and not that I put fear in them. They know my look, and they could tell if I'm getting. They're like, and they'll simmer down a little bit. And it's now I'm like, why did you do that? I'm like, oh, we know that look. That looked like you're about to just snap, and that didn't make me feel good. Even though they did what I wanted them to do, I didn't want them to fear me. I wanted them to respect me, but yet I wanted them to understand why I'm giving you these instructions, why I'm disciplining you. And how I did that was I would share my personal experiences without sharing too much,
right?
Just enough for them to get,
oh,
okay, I get it.
Yeah. I think it's also important to call out, though, that discipline can take different forms, right? It's not always a whooping. I know there were some times where I observed whoopings, and I would come and ask the child a little later, what you get a whooping for? They had no clue, right? So you got to see how effective the whooping is. I got them. We got a lot of things, but, and every child is going to be different. So, I have a friend who knows a whooping can get it done for one child, knows that just the fact that you disappointed mom and dad is going to send that kid to their own punishment. The other one had to cut his hair. Like, there's different things. Like, you can get really, I'm not saying get creative on how to punish your kids. I'm saying learn your children to understand and learn, how we're going to discipline. They're all different. They're going to receive something different. But going back to conflict, in the family, I think, especially when we're dealing it within family, I think one overarching rule that has done me well with my friendships and my family, when things come up, I am very clear. I ask a question. What is my role in this? Are you asking me to listen? Are you asking me to guide? Are you asking me to pray? What is my role? So I understand, right? And I think that'll be helpful. And then also, try very hard to just pause and take your flesh out of it, because we can have this conflict for a long time that's not getting anywhere because we've got roots, we've got stake in the game. to what hurt us, right? I think we've got some statements from the audience. So we have Anissa Miles who says, in this season, we talk about conflicts with those that are willing to talk about conflict. That's right. Time is very important, and you have to definitely give family space, time to grow and heal. Social media, I don't play with family business. Say that, Anissa. Say that. You're right. We got to give people some space. And Patricia says, a conversation when I had to listen more than talk. Oh, that's good. That is so good. That's rich wisdom there, because sometimes we got to pause and just listen, right? Listening is a gift within itself.
Yeah, it's so funny. I love all the points that you made, Nat. One of the things I had to learn was to really humble myself to find that connection, because sometimes I being raised in a Haitian strict home, everything was honor and respect. There was no talking back, of course. There was no, well, let's have a conversation for us to understand the whys. There was this is what you did, this is your punishment, and this is it. And you just said, yes, ma'am, and that was the end of that. Where I took some of that, because we implement what we're familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. So I took some of that into my home, the Pierce household, but I tweaked it. I'm big on respect and honor, but I also empower my children to speak and to think. So
that's good.
That is so good. To respect me in that process. Yeah. So it's just to say, yes, speak. I want you to, and it works, because now I can gauge where they're at in the season and how to maneuver. But in that, I had to learn that I didn't want to be a dictator. I wasn't always right, because I didn't have all the answers. But I had to humble myself to find that connection and be like, okay, I'm in the pocket. I'm with you. Now, how do I address this? And sometimes it wasn't necessary for me to fix. It was listen.
Serge, I love that. I love that, to empower your kids. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. You want your children to grow up to be confident individuals, able to assert themselves, able to communicate well. And so you do empower them. I was just looking at a comment from Patricia. She was saying it took me years to learn that there's a difference between my daughter and my son, that my son and my daughter were different.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at them as individuals and you're trying to figure out what it is that this person needs to thrive and what it is that this person needs to thrive, then they can, as you say, be empowered to have those communications, whether it's in your family, whether it's in the workplace, wherever it is. That's awesome. That's a huge takeaway. Listening and empowering. I love it.
Yeah, and that's something that will live on. It'll linger. I mean, you're developing a skill that's almost a life skill, right? To have healthy relationships, I need to learn how to put voice to what I'm feeling. And I'm gonna be honest, I find myself to be a relatively decent communicator, but there are times where I feel like, do I don't, you know what I mean? And I go through my whole vetting process, and sometimes I'm in a holding pattern for a long time. Like, do I, don't I? So again, when you establish that in your family, that's awesome, because that's almost the culture. That's the norm. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Awesome.
So just the last thing I would just toss in is kind of where I began. And that's basically just the importance of listening, If you can give people time, space, that they feel comfortable relating to you, they feel comfortable opening up to you. You're not dismissing their point of view, like, well, just because I don't agree with it, it must be stupid or it's ridiculous, but letting them share what they're actually feeling with you. And then you respond kind of objectively. We kind of have to take our emotions and rein them in a little bit and move the conversation over. Somebody once said, what you're really looking for is neutral energy. You don't want to come in hot. We're all frustrated and you're yelling at each other, but find that neutral energy and then start listening. I think that's key.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Well, you know what, ladies, this was another good one. Family conflict is just, it's not a thing. It's like a definite, right? It's not a random thing. We just know that it's going to happen. And, our intent was to just give people a different insight, some more insight, and equip them with just some food for thought on what to consider when you're leaning into conflict, and do it in love. You
Yeah.
know, be gracious to the people that you love, cover them, ask for permission. As Alexa said, listen, and you know, see your role in all of it. Well, this was our vantage point, and again, we're just three vantage points out of millions, and we'd love to hear your insight, your thoughts, your experiences, your vulnerable moments, maybe some advice that you can share with the rest of us. But again, we're the ladies of Vantage Point. Be sure to subscribe to all of our social media, our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. We're on Instagram. We want to hear from you. And again, that's our Vantage Point. What's yours?